Well, thanks for joining my session here. I'm pleased to be again here at DITA World, and I'm happy to talk with you today about what's coming with DITA 2.0 and how you can get prepared for it. So a quick overview of what I'll be covering in this session. A little bit of background information about myself, OASIS and the DITA Technical Committee, previous releases of DITA, and then a real focus on DITA 2.0, why we're doing a backwards incompatible release, and what's out in DITA 2.0 and what's new. And throughout, I'm going to provide some tips about how you can get ready for DITA 2.0. So just a little background about me. I'm a longtime DITA geek. I've been using DITA on a daily basis since 2004 and was one of the early beta users of DITA at IBM in 2002. I'm a consultant, longtime leader with the OASIS DITA Technical Committee, and in the course of my information development career, I've worn all sorts of different hats. I've been an information developer, an architect, a team lead, a tool specialist, and a DITA educator. About the only things I haven't done are I haven't been a manager and I haven't been an editor. I've declined moving into editor roles at IBM. Just a little bit of background, maybe for those of you who are more newcomers to DITA. DITA is maintained and developed by a technical committee at OASIS, and OASIS stands for the Organization for the Advancement of Structured Information Standards. The important thing to really know is it's a nonprofit consortium, and it is very committed to open development and full transparency. That really means that everything we do as a DITA technical committee is open, visible, and can be viewed by the world. Our emails, our meeting agendas, our meeting minutes, all of our work artifacts. And that's maybe a good segue to just say, who is the DITA Technical Committee? And here you can see photos of the 16 of us that get on the phone once a week, work very hard for 60 minutes to develop DITA. And we really represent a broad set of roles. We have folks that are content architects and content engineers at companies who are managers. We have consultants. We have application developers from vendors. And we try to bring an awareness of all of those different users of DITA to our work developing the standard. So there have been several previous releases of DITA, and just a highlight here of the 4 releases that have preceded DITA 2.0 and what was included in those releases, largely for background information. But the important thing to know is until now, every release of DITA, we had a commitment to make it be backwards compatible with the preceding releases. And over the years, that's gotten increasingly labor intensive, and it's really tied our hands. And this is part of the reason why DITA 2.0 is going to be a backwards incompatible release. It's our opportunity to get rid of technical debt, get rid of unnecessary things that have crept into the standard over the years, fix design mistakes, and generally do some housekeeping. Think of this as similar to the fact that you every so often you need to do a deep cleaning of a house or redesign and update your kitchen. Maybe you've decided that you can see that you've added some drawers over the years and 2 drawers bump into each other and you can't open them at the same time. Well, DITA 2.0 is our opportunity to fix things like that in the standard. At the same time, we know that people's reaction to hearing that DITA 2.0 is backwardsly incompatible is a bit of fear. The quotations here are ones that I literally have gotten in other presentations about DITA 2.0. with people saying, oh no, this is going to break all of my content, or this is going to be a lot of work. And yes, there will be breakages. There will be work, but the DITA TC has really committed to try to do this as thoughtfully as possible. Throughout our development of DITA 2.0, we really have ensured that anything we consider needs to have a very strong use case in which the benefits of the change outweighs the cost of having to do some migration. We're also very committed to providing assistance in terms of scripts, in terms of committee notes, in terms of all sorts of documentation and webinars to help provide people with the information they need to move to a new version of DITA. So let's look at what we are removing from DITA in the 2.0 release. The very first kind of no-brainer thing for us was to say, for DITA 2.0, this is the time that we're going to remove everything that has been marked as deprecated or was initially categorized as reserved for future use but never used, or added by mistake. Like everybody, we make mistakes, but for us, if we've made a mistake in the grammar files and accidentally added an attribute someplace where it doesn't make any sense, we haven't been able to remove it. We've had to keep that in to ensure that backwards compatibility was saved. So with DITA 2.0, we've got the opportunity to get rid of all of this stuff. And the things that I really want to focus here, what I think of as the big four, are these four attributes that get removed in DITA 2.0. All of them have clear replacements, and all of them have been deprecated for quite a long time. So the things here to really think about are the alt attribute, which was initially in early versions of DITA used to provide alternate text for images. That was replaced by the alt element in DITA 1.2, as was the nav title attribute, which was replaced by the nav title element. These things go away, as does the print attribute and the title attribute on maps. So there are other things that get removed as being part of this cleansing of deprecated old items. But the ones I mentioned are the ones that I think most folks might need to do some cleanup of their existing DITA content. And again, so if you're thinking about towards how do you prepare, what you can do right now to prepare for DITA 2.0 is to get rid of these old deprecated attributes. Most of these alt, nav title, and title on map were deprecated because we needed to move forward to providing that information in elements which are more easily localized. And the print attribute was really removed because it was, it's old functionality. We know most folks deliver to much more complicated delivery targets than just web or print, and we needed more functionality. So again, with the how do you prepare, you really want to ensure that any new content, in addition, of course, to cleansing your old content of these attributes we just looked at, prepare by looking and ensuring that new content that you're creating doesn't include any of these deprecated items. And this might involve making changes to your authoring templates, might involve upgrading to a new version of an application, or asking your tools vendors to improve their applications. And this is a really good time to check how your tools And we know that many people have multiple tools in their DITA application that they're using, certainly at an enterprise level. But check out how your tools handle alternate text for images, navigation titles, titles for DITA map. And if your tools are automatically using any of these deprecated elements, talk pretty promptly to your tools vendor. Better to get them working now on these issues than a year and a half from now when DITA 2.0 is formally released and you want to move to it. So, quick item here that is just pertaining to the XML documentation for AEM. I'm figuring that since this is DITA World, we do have a significant number of companies that use that CCMS on this webinar. Right now, if you're using AEM and you insert an image and specify alternate text, the editor does automatically put the alternative text in the alt attribute. And the only way you can insert an alt element is to do it in the source view in the editor. But this is scheduled to be fixed in the 4.0 release that is coming out in June. So just to let you know that Adobe and AEM are aware of this, and it will be fixed. So if we're back on the how do you prepare, in a similar vein, if you have the print attribute used in any of your DITA maps, the work here is a little more complicated than switching just to using the comparable replacement element. Here, what you really want to think about is creating a subject scheme map that defines the values for delivery target. And then in your source, replace the print attribute with a delivery target attribute set to the appropriate value. And of course, develop or modify your existing DITA files to handle the conditional processing appropriately. The other thing that is out in DITA 2.0 is that the DITA Technical Committee will no longer provide XSDs, XML schema files. And this will be a hit to online authoring tools that use XSD files. We're no longer going to be providing these XSD files simply because we don't have the resources to develop and maintain 3 versions of grammar files. RNG is our normative format, and we also provide DTD files because we know how many applications use them. So, again, check whether your implementation uses any tools that require XSDs. And if it does, ask your tool vendor what their plans are for how they will develop XSD files for DITA 2.0. And just a caveat here, your vendor might not know if the DITA 2.0, that the DITA TC is not distributing XSDs for DITA 2.0. We're trying to get the word out. We have a webinar scheduled for June with vendors of DITA tools to go over all of the contours of DITA 2.0. And here we've got a table that just sort of tries to list a number of other things that are removed in DITA 2.0. And I think the things perhaps of most interest to people would be that we are removing the learning and training specialization and the machinery task from DITA 2.0. We know that those specializations have users, they have support in the community, but the DITA Technical Committee just doesn't have the resources or the expertise, particularly around the machinery task, to continue maintaining them. So what we're doing is we will be moving the necessary files for those specializations to an open OASIS GitHub repository. And hopefully that moving those specializations to a GitHub repository will enable folks that have been unable to join OASIS because perhaps of the cost of OASIS membership to get involved in working on those specializations. Other things we're removing is just in general, we remove things that kind of fall into certain buckets, if you will, where we have duplicative elements, where we have functionality that's really not appropriate to a standard, and the copy to attribute is a good example of that. Or elements and domains that are not frequently used and really do not have strong use cases. So, how do you prepare for these document types and elements that are being removed in DITA 2.0? The first thing is really to embark on a content audit and know just what document types, what elements are you currently using. And if you are using document types that are being removed from DITA 2.0, make sure you budget some time to be able to work with those when you move to DITA 2.0. You'll need to get those specializations from GitHub. You'll need to build your own company-specific document type shells if you don't currently have them. And all doable things, just a little bit more work and budget time for it. In a similar vein, if your DITA source has elements that we're removing from DITA 2.0 or attributes that are being removed, you really want to think about it. And, the two things to consider is, can you use an alternate existing element? If you can't, your fallback would really be to respecialize those elements for your own purpose and use. Similar thing with removed attributes. If you've used XTRF and XTRC for whatever kind of unique purpose, think about whether you can remove them. If you can't, you'll need to respecialize them and integrate them into your document type shells. If you use copy to extensively, and we know that some people do, we know that there's a strong use case for the functionality that the copy to attribute provided. Look at your processor and ask the development team for the processor what their plan is. What sort of functionality are they adding? As part of removing copy to from the DITA standard, we are providing a cleaner architectural mechanism for using the resource ID to indicate to a processor where there is a hook for providing similar functionality to copy to. And we, the DITA TC, will be providing a committee note that will provide more information about how to use resource ID for that purpose. So enough said about what's out in DITA 2.0. I think a lot of us are more interested in knowing what's new. What are the new goodies that are coming? Why might I want to upgrade to DITA 2.0? And one of the things we have is we have some very solid enhancements to Bookmap. And here we know that there have been problems with Bookmap, particularly as DITA, the standard, has evolved, and we've added new things like keys, subject scheme maps, branch filtering, and that the bookmap design really did not accommodate those changes to the DITA standard. There was no way for authors to specify that they wanted to apply a DITA file to an entire book map, no clean place to really specify where to locate your resource-only objects like key definition maps or subject scheme. And so what we've done here is we've made some very simple modifications to the content model of Bookmap and its elements to accommodate these. And we've also just added a new element in the map group domain, map resources. So the map resources element, this provides the intuitive and semantic location for specifying your resources. By default, the map resources element has the processing role attribute set to resource only, and that cascades to the child elements. So you no longer have to specify processing role equals resource only on each of your map references for subject schemes or for key definition maps. In a similar vein, you now will be able to insert a DITA ref element after your titles, and it will apply to your entire book map. All of these changes to Bookmap were things that I championed and were also heavily influenced by Eric Serwan at Ixiasoft. Another critical change is that with DITA 2.0, authors will have the ability to nest steps elements. And this provides critical functionality. It addresses the use cases of people really wanted to be able to have better reuse of steps. And also wanted to avoid having, the hacks of inserting lists within a info element. And so what we've done here, and this proposal, by the way, was championed by Robert Anderson at Oracle, is that we're enabling steps to nest infinitely. And the consequence of this is that we're removing substeps and substep. So all of your task topics that use substeps will be affected by this and will need modifications before you can use DITA 2.0. I'll confess, I initially had some reservations here. I was not thrilled by the idea of enabling infinite nesting of steps. But I think the ability to reuse steps more easily outweighs the cost. And I'll just remind folks that it's very easy to implement schematron rules to limit the level of nesting that your authors can do. If your editing environment doesn't currently allow the use of schematron, maybe a good time to ask your tools vendor about implementing support for schematron. Another important change coming with DITA 2.0 is we have finally support for multimedia elements. Now, I know that folks have been able to use the object element in DITA for multimedia, but it's always been pretty painful. And what we've done here for DITA 2.0 is we've introduced 5 new elements, one for audio, one for video, and then some child elements, fallback, media source, and media track, that really enable you to provide all the information about multimedia objects that you need to provide. And this becomes very parallel to HTML5. Another of the use cases for this is that these changes were very necessary in order to have DITA 2.0 to be a solid base for lightweight DITA. Just a few examples here of an audio element, of a video element, and what you get here is also the ability to provide multiple source formats for your audio or your video so that whatever is rendering the multimedia can work with the format that they handle best. And of course, also ability for you to add subtitles and descriptions in however many languages as you need. Another change here, championed by Don Stevens at Contact, was a much needed enhancement to the troubleshooting topic. And here we have we're introducing a specific semantic element to contain diagnostic information. We know that folks have needed a place to put diagnostic information, and they've gone through quite a number of hacks since the introduction of the troubleshooting topic with DITA 1.3 to be able to provide it. No need for those hacks. In DITA 2.0, we have clean, clear semantic elements in which you can locate the diagnostic information. Another proposal that was championed and brought forward by Robert Anderson is the ability to add output class to the DITA files. And this will give content authors the ability to control more CSS-based rendering for their DITA content. By adding output class to the output class attribute to DITA files, we simply make the formatting that is already available for styling rev attributes or filtering attributes available to content that is tagged with output class. Another change with DITA 2.0 comes around the area of alternate titles. This was championed by Kristen, formerly of Oberon, now an individual member. And the use case here was to enable DITA practitioners to specialize titles more effectively for topic and map types. We previously had alternative titles only available in topics. With DITA 2.0, they become available in maps. This new title alt element that we introduced becomes a new specialization base for search title, nav title, and link title. And you'll note that I have those color-coded, highlighted here in red. And where I have things in red is just to indicate that these are things that might, these are some backward incompatible changes that might affect your content. If you've specialized any of these elements, such as search title or nav title, or you're going to need to do some changes here to potentially your style sheets, specializations, or constraints. Or this change also removes the lock title attribute. So if you've used that to ensure that the content you provided by a nav title element was used as a navigation title, you'll need to remove that from your source. And here, a change that is fully backwards compatible is we've made some significant enhancements to Simple Table. We've known that a lot of folks have been forced to use CALS tables rather than Simple Tables because of the limitations of not being able to add titles or span rows and columns. In a similar vein, the limitations of simple title have made it very difficult for DITA practitioners to do table specializations in a way they wanted to. So for DITA 2.0, we have changed simple table. It can contain a title. You can span rows and columns. And these changes were also setting the ground for DITA 2.0 to be the appropriate base for lightweight DITA. And the other thing here with the changes to simple table is it now means that DITA 2.0 simple tables will be very, very close to HTML5 tables, which simply makes it easier for new applications to support lightweight DITA and DITA itself. Another change we do have here is we've done a redesign of chunking. And while we know that the chunk attribute has provided, very necessary functionality, it's also been quite painful for people. I'll be honest, I never can remember what all the different tokens used for the chunk attribute do. Every time I use chunk, I have to go to the spec and look things up. And it's been very difficult for application developers to build good, robust support for chunking. So what we're doing here in DITA 2.0 is we remove all of the previously defined tokens for the chunk attribute, and we replace them with two, hopefully clear and intuitive tokens, combine and split. You can use combine to merge multiple DITA topics into one output file. You can use split to ensure that one DITA topic is used to produce multiple objects in your output. And another proposal here that I championed is that we have a new element for defining variable text. And if you started using variable text beginning with DITA 2.0, defining variable text used by key references, for example, to define a company name or an application or product name, you probably quickly found that there are a whole bunch of different ways I can do this. I could use the link text element in my key definition. I could use keyword. Maybe I can do even something really rather arcane like audience or author. Well, this has been very difficult to keep straight for application developers. The rules for how variable text needs to be resolved have gotten more and more complicated. And here with DITA 2.0, we drove a stake in the ground and said, no more, let's fix this, let's clean this up. And what we have done is we've added a new element, key text. We've established some new, very clear rules for how variable text defined using key references get resolved. The impact here is if you're currently using key reference for your variable text, with DITA 2.0, you cannot use keyword. So if you've done that, you will need to make changes to your source to use key text. Number of other kind of behind-the-scenes changes that probably aren't going to ever be obvious to DITA authors. But if you are a practitioner or a style sheet developer or building document type shells for your implementation, you might notice that some of these things have changed. We have changed the value of the class attribute. the specialization base for some elements, and we have also recreated all of the filtering attributes, audience, platform, etc., product, as proper specializations of attributes. So that will affect what you do in your document type shells. Too many changes for me to go into one by one. So just a list of some of the other things we have done here. We redesigned hazard statement. We improved indexing. We're allowing example in more places. We have some new domains for emphasis and strong for hardware, and other things that you can see coming forward. So it's a little less clear how you can prepare for this. Obviously, you can't rework your content to use new DITA elements until you're actually using DITA 2.0. But this is a very good time for you to do that very thorough content audit and think about where you are either going to have to make changes in the future. For example, for the element that you use to define variable text by key reference, or whether you use substeps. It's also an opportunity for you to look at your content after doing a content audit and think about where there are places where you aren't forced to make changes for DITA 2.0, but might want to make changes to improve your content. Are you using the troubleshooting topic and using a hack to specify your diagnostic information? Are you using object for multimedia and the new multimedia elements might be better? It's your opportunity to look at these things and think about them. And again, I think the thing we want to ensure here is don't wait until DITA 2.0 is out to start thinking about how and when you want to adopt it and what you need to do. Because DITA 2.0 is a backwards incompatible release, give yourself some time and runway. Start thinking now so that you're not trying to do too much at a later date. And again, I did mention this earlier, haven't really focused in detail on this. The TC will be putting out some committee notes and perhaps a webinar to deal with this in more depth. But if you have company-specific document type shells that use some of your own specializations or constraints, if you have your own company-specific style sheets, these things might also need to be changed for DITA 2.0. So ensure that you're giving time for this work to happen. And this is the end of my presentation. I want to thank everybody for calling in. I appreciate folks' interest in DITA 2.0. And once again, I'm delighted that Adobe has asked me to be part of their Adobe World Conference, Adobe DITA World Conference in 2021. And maybe in 2022, we will not be still in the midst of a COVID pandemic. Thank you very much.
We all hope so. Kristen, thanks a lot for your presentation, and thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure, Stefan. Thank you so much.